everyone. For those of you who are new to our podcast, I'm Matthew Tong, and I'll be your host for today's topic on SUR ROUND SOUND. Before we begin, I would like to share that we are recording this episode on Wednesday, March 17th. By the time this airs, it'll probably be around June or July. However, that does not mean it's too late to let us know what topics you would like us to discuss regarding music or the entertainment industry in the future. So please, don't be shy. Come say hi and let us know what is up in your world in the comments on our YouTube videos or Instagram posts. And if you have any specific questions or business inquiries, you can email us at thesurroundsoundpodcast@gmail.com. Today, I'll be talking with Dave Boxenbaum about metadata. As our technological abilities advance, so do our abilities to capture, calculate, and analyze data. Big data analytics are no longer an unheard of phenomenon. They are the current paradigm. On the other hand, the music industry has struggled to keep up with this trend. According to The Verge, metadata is the biggest problem plaguing the music industry because, quote, by some estimations, billions on the table are unpaid to musicians, end quote. The clear solution would be, why don't we just integrate our technological solutions into the music industry? Turns out, this issue is not so simple. To help unknot these complexities for us, I've invited an expert and mentor of mine to join our discussion. Today's guest has previously served as a senior consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers, known as PwC, and as CEO of A&M Octone Records, a media advisors in Albany, New York. Listeners, please welcome David Boxenbaum. Hi, Dave. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
So where are you right now?
I'm in downtown Manhattan. I'm sitting in my bedroom, looking out over a gray sky. It's all good.
I'm glad. So to begin our conversation, what is metadata? Could you kind of explain to our audience what is metadata?
Sure. So metadata applies not just to music, but any piece of media. It applies to a video, it applies to a book. Metadata, quite simply, is the information associated with a piece of media. So let's just talk about music. Metadata is as simple as the name of the artist and the name of the song, down to very detailed information. There are unique numbers like the SRC code that are like a serial number for a song. It should have the publisher and the writers and their associated splits and who owns both the recording and the publishing. So really, the metadata is all the information you need to both identify a song, but also to identify the owners of the song, because that really gets into the critical issue around payment. And you mentioned the billions of dollars left on the table. That's specifically something called black box money. And at any given time, there's at least $3 billion sitting in black boxes because the payees, and this is really a lot of it's around what are called performance royalties, which are the money paid to publishers around the use of their music on radio, on TV. PROs collect that money from TV stations, radio stations, digital and terrestrial, and they turn around and pay it out to the rights holder. However, because there are millions of listens a day, it's something that has to be done with the technology layer, and to, in essence, match the money to the rights holder. That's all done through the metadata. And if the metadata that the PRO has around the song and the money doesn't match the metadata with the rights holder, the money doesn't get paid. And that's called quote unquote registration errors, where the metadata just doesn't match. And sometimes it can be off by very little, a misplaced, comma, missing a parentheses on a guest spot, to fundamentally large buckets of information missing. Certain publishers missing, incorrect splits. There's so much data that can go wrong. And also metadata has attached to it potentially information about the genre, the style, the mood, and the tempo, which if done properly can help market the music so that search engines and streaming services can can use that data to categorize the song, put it in genres, put it on playlists. So if you accidentally have a rock track tagged as a hip hop track or not tagged at all, it's going to inhibit your ability to market and sell the music.
So from what I'm hearing from you is that metadata actually serves like multiple purposes. It's not just the financial side, but it's also the marketing side. Am I correct?
100%. So ideally, especially when you have what I would call, now we really have end-to-end digital. The production is done digitally, the marketing is done digitally, and most of the sales are done digitally. So the metadata is so important because all of the technology on every step of the digital supply chain is routing and categorizing your music based on the metadata. And so the richer your metadata is, and forget about the payment side, I'm talking about the marketing and sales side. The richer your metadata is, the better it can be marketed, the better it can be found in search, and the better it can be categorized to help ultimately find fans.
So this is sort of like going into like the big data world, that the tech world, that's how the tech industry is really flourishing, is because they have such a huge set of data, and they're able to aggregate it and analyze it and just feed into AI and machine learning, and in order to market their own products. It's sort of this concept, but then the music industry hasn't really catching up to the technological revolution. Is that sort of where we're getting at?
Well, the problem is not technology. The technology exists to do what needs to get done, and some of the technology has been deployed even within the music industry. The challenge is really around stakeholders. So let's just talk about music publishing, because that's much more complex metadata, because unlike a recording, which tends to have one owner, a copyright can have 5 or 6 different owners, because there are 5 or 6 different writers, and they're with different publishing companies. They're all getting, those 5 or 6 companies are all getting paid for the same song. And so, but what happens is there's a lot of stakeholders who affect metadata and can cause it to kind of get screwed up. So let's start with the writers and the artists. When a songwriter writes a song, they're supposed to provide their splits to the publishing company. Sometimes they provide incorrect splits, like, oh, it's 50-50 with me and this other writer. Then it turns out there was a third writer. Oops, I forgot about him. So that's, already causing metadata problems. The record labels who are uploading music to Spotify and all the services should ideally be including the publishing metadata with the song, but often they don't. So they're sending a song out that doesn't have the publishing metadata. And so the publisher has to kind of track down the songs, talk directly to Spotify, make sure they're right metadata. And then the PROs, the performance rights organizations, who are collecting performance royalties. So if you have a song that gets spun once on a radio station in Mongolia, technically that radio station for every play is paying the rights holder. Now, the radio station in Mongolia is not writing a check to Sony ATV. There's a PRO. Every country has one or multiple PROs, performance rights organizations. Their job is to collect money from that radio station. Then the rights holders can basically connect via electronically to the PROs to say, here are all of our songs. Let's match it. Not using a naked eye, it's just using basically very basic data matching. When that connection is incorrect, the money doesn't get paid. And what the PROs do is they don't tell you didn't get paid, because they don't know that in fact it didn't get matched. But what happens is the money sits in a bank account, i.e. the black box, until it gets paid. And what's also very confusing is there's not one source of metadata. There's not a single database that has all the metadata, like a wiki where everybody puts their metadata. So if you think about the three main parties, you've got the payee, who's like a broadcaster, radio station or TV station. You have the PROs in the middle and the rights holders on the other side. They are often not, even though they might all have the same song, the metadata they're attaching to it might be coming from different sources, because there are multiple companies out there that sell metadata and license metadata, and sometimes they're often incorrect and they're different from one database to the other. And so when you look at the music industry, one of the goals is developing what everybody calls the single source of truth. The idea that there will be one database that everybody works off of, because just by everybody having the same metadata and working off the same database will dramatically improve this. The problem is that some of the stakeholders, amazingly enough, don't have an incentive to fix the problem. In fact, they have an incentive for it not to be fixed. And that is part of why we still have this problem, is that, like I said, the technology exists. It's not a technological problem. It's really an adoption/stakeholder problem.
So you talked about a lot of different things. So I want to kind of break it down for our audience here. So let's talk about like the performing rights organization. And you sort of also talk about like the single source of truth. My question is that, would you agree that like the PRO is sort of like the middleman, because they're sort of like the collector and linking between the publisher or the record holder and the payees? Are they like more of the middleman? And I do have a follow-up question right after this.
So to enable your follow-up question, I'll simply say yes, they absolutely are when it comes to performance royalty payments.
So my biggest question is, why don't they have this quote unquote the single source of truth if they are that one middleman? I know that there are multiple PROs, but assuming that multiple PROs run on their own system, why is there no single source of truth based on their own PRO?
So there's several reasons for that. One of which is the PROs do not have incentive to fix the problem. They'll never say that, but in every PRO's P&L, they have a line item on the revenue side for money they make from interest on black box money. Because if money isn't paid out, what happens is it sits in the black box, which is a bank account, and the PRO makes money, makes the interest while it sits there. And generally speaking, they can hold on to it for 2 to 3 years. Then at that point, if they still haven't identified who the payee is, then they just pay it out on a prorated basis based on market share of the publisher, which also leads to the next stakeholder, which are the publishers, specifically the major publishers. So I have not heard a major publisher say this out loud, but major publishers, ironically, do have some incentive to keep the system as is, because they overly benefit from black box money. Because if you're a small publisher, but you have an oversized hit song, and some of that song's performance royalties sit in the black box, you are going to get a much smaller share of that money than if it had been paid directly, because it gets put into the pool, and the bigger publishers are getting more of your money versus you getting all of your money. So the bigger rights holders have an incentive to maintain the status quo.
My second question is that you also talked about how this is not a technological and algorithmic issue, because according to what you're saying, what I'm assuming that you're saying is that the technology is actually already there. It's just that there's sort of like these stakeholders problem. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on Jack Dorsey's acquisition, Square's acquisition of Tidal Music? Because I feel like another solution would probably be a fintech company and then another tech company, which I suppose that would be Tidal in this place. The combination of those two could potentially progress into resolving this metadata issue. What are your opinions on this thought?
I don't think that's what Tidal and Square's I don't think that's what Square's intent was. I think Square's intent on buying Tidal was twofold. One of which is the Cash App, which is a very big business for Square. The demographics of the user base is very similar to Tidal. So in essence, it's a great marketing channel for them for cash, for the Cash App, period. I think the other is owning Tidal gives Square and Cash direct or indirect relationships with artists and rights holders. And obviously Square and Cash are dealing in crypto, and I'm guessing that if NFTs become more popular, Square has a big interest in NFTs succeeding, and owning title gives them direct and indirect relationships with artists and rights holders who are key partners in issuance of NFTs. I think that's probably more the focus. I don't think for them solving metadata is really that important to them. There are companies out there that have solutions for it. There's a company I know really smart guys called Verify Media that have built a blockchain platform to be the single source of truth. Their approach right now is it's going to be a long time for get everybody on it, but because metadata is so complex, individual music companies need their own kind of internal single source of truth to manage just all of their metadata. Can you think about a major label, Warner, Sony, they have millions of recordings and copyrights, literally millions. And to manage and update the metadata is really a challenging task, and they need it to be dynamic and updating. I consult to a company called Exactuals, has a product called Ray, which is a AI product which helps clean up the mismatches between rights holders and PROs, so that it uses AI to look at a PRO's kind of database and says, okay, this one doesn't match exactly, but based on the AI analysis, we think this is yours. So it gives tools to rights holders to go to the PRO and say, we think these belong to us, and it enables you to capture income. But the technology is simple. It's either a wiki or a blockchain-based platform. There are a few other companies trying to build it, Jaxta, among others. The key thing is getting all the stakeholders to buy into it in the figurative sense, in the conceptual sense, and then participate. Because if you build this great platform, but nobody's willing to abide by it and use it as a single source, then it doesn't matter. And so I can tell you the one party that absolutely wants it are all the payees, whether you're a TV station or a broadcaster or digital radio, because they have to pay out the money regardless of whether it makes it to the rights holders or not. The PROs are going to ensure that. And so that is just a headache for them. And they have to get it right with the PRO first. In essence, the payees have to match with the PROs. And often the payees, radio station, TV, digital radio, aren't looking at don't have the same metadata base as the PRO. So the PRO is rejecting their payments because, your log of what you played isn't aligning with our metadata. And because the payees all have licensing agreements with the PROs, as part of the licensing agreement, they have to get it right. And so there's a lot of back and forth. And the broadcasters don't have any get this fixed because they just want to make the payments and move on with their lives. And that's they would love this. Certainly, a lot of rights holders would like this, especially the smaller ones, because they don't have the infrastructure that the bigger rights holders have to do it. And remember, the PROs have existed before digital was a thing. So in the olden days, the PRO's job was much more labor intensive and manual. So if a radio station, plays a song, they were literally mailing in or faxing in like a log of what they were playing, and then people had to compare that to what the rights holders were doing, and that was very labor intensive. So you really needed a middleman. Now this is all happening digitally. Technically, you don't need a PRO. Technically, the rights holders could go direct to the payees and collect directly, which would reduce the amount of errors and also save them money because the PROs charge the rights holders for the service to collect the money. Generally, I think it's about 8 to 13%, depending on the PRO. So you could recapture that margin as well as reduce the amount of errors. The problem is that you need a robust enough platform that everybody would be confident they get the job done. It would be a third party. And that idea of direct registration is a lot of music tech companies who are thinking about or are in the process of building direct registration platforms where basically it's a SaaS platform where they enable rights holders to exchange data and collect money from the payees. And the direct registration platforms never hold on to the money, unlike a PRO. Because the PRO takes possession of the money from the payee and turns around and then pays the rights holder. A direct registration company, it's literally a SaaS platform. Like you guys put in your info, the money goes directly between you and the payees. We're not touching the money. So that would seriously help the situation. I think that's inevitable. But it's not tomorrow. But I think we're probably at least a couple of years away from that. But the writing is on the wall. And I think that, the most people kind of have a love-hate relationship with PROs, sometimes more hate than love. And I think the PROs have the opportunity to protect their business, but to require them to upgrade their technology and really address the black box problem in something better than a cosmetic way.
So I feel like you kind of really touched upon the PRO, and now that you have kind of elaborated, it's really obvious to see why the PRO are not really incentivized, as you say, to push forward metadata. But so it's kind of this like, because I've talked to actually a lot of tech friends, and they're like, and they told me like, what's the point of having PRO? It creates an additional middleman that is unnecessary because the technology is all there. Just like you said, the blockchain solution, which is literally what it is. We just need a blockchain solution, the matching principle. And that's the fundamental of the blockchain solution. So a lot of my friends are like, wait, we don't really need a middleman because the technology is all there and we're actually going through an extra fee. So the middleman is unnecessary. So that's also one part of the stakeholder. But the other part is I really want to look at the other part of the stakeholder, which is the artist, because they're the one who are the ones that are deeply affected by this. So my question to you is, why are the artists unable to resolve this issue? Because I feel like this has a lot to do. If we have to look like analogously, we could look at the NBA collective bargaining agreement, whereas the players are basically fighting for their rights. When we look back at the 1970s, 1980s, when Bill Russell really fought for their contracts, or was it 1960s? Anyways, I wasn't living during that time, so I couldn't tell. But they were fighting for their bargaining contract. Why isn't artists able to replicate what the players did? I'm just speaking analogously, and why aren't they able to resolve this issue?
That's an excellent question. There's a couple of answers. One of which is, even though there is actually a musicians union, AFM, SAG-AFTRA, those are really geared towards kind of session musicians and Broadway music. So the Drakes of the world are not members of the union. The other thing is that, in essence, the entities that are really fighting, to change this are not really the artists themselves, but their publishing companies. And most artists either have a publishing deal or a publishing administrator who are theoretically the ones who are representing them on this issue. So, and by the way, could an artist complain about it? Absolutely. And I guarantee you, if big artists complained about it, there would be a lot of kerfuffle and everybody would get together and nothing would change. Because like a union, what are the artists' options? Go on strike, not release music. Unfortunately, their music publishers and their record labels might say, yes, we understand, but holding back music is kind of cutting off our nose to spite our face. And let's not let perfection be the enemy of good enough, because although the system isn't good, it more or less works. And let's keep the train on the tracks while we try and figure a longer term solution.
Yeah, I could see why. So I kind of want to shift gears because you kind of talked about NFT, and I feel like NFT is is like the hottest new topic, especially when it comes to intangible assets. So could you explain to us a little bit what NFT is, and also kind of explain to us what blockchain solution is? I know you're not a tech guy, so try your best just to like explain what
Sure.
it is.
So basically, what the idea of NFT is, it stands for non-fungible tokens. So think of crypto as a fungible token, like any cryptocurrency. It's like a fungible currency is like cash, negotiable security. So NFT is like the code of a crypto, but it's not like a piece of currency. And so what NFTs do, it's basically taking a piece of IP, like an album, like Kings of Leon put out a record as an NFT. So what happens is when you buy the Kings of Leon NFT, you're technically not buying the album. You're buying that piece of NFT code. Irrevocably linked to it is the album and all the content. So blockchain and crypto are in essence one of the same thing. Like crypto is an application that think of crypto to blockchain like the web is to the internet. Like people think the World Wide Web and the internet are the same thing. They're not. The World Wide Web is an application that sits on top of the internet. But when you're sending email over the internet. Well, if you're sending it from your desktop, you're sending it over the internet, not the web. If you're on your Gmail web client, you're sending over the web. And so, because blockchain is, because when we talk about, take a step backwards, Tom. So when we're talking about metadata and blockchain, we're talking about, fundamentally what blockchain is a decentralized database. It has and different blockchains, and which are, by the way, which is confusing. All the blockchains names are associated with crypto. So Ethereum has the Ethereum blockchain. Bitcoin has the Bitcoin blockchain, et cetera, et cetera. Bitcoin was the first, so it's candidly kind of the most basic. Ethereum has better functionality, but what it does is think of a blockchain like a much more accountable, transparent wiki. And so it enables, it has these immutable ledgers where the ledger can, so when it comes to whether it's NFT or crypto or metadata, these ledgers track all of the data, and only the people who are, and you can set it up to manage who has the right to change the data or not change the data. And it's decentralized in the sense no one owns it or controls it. It kind of sits in nodes, not unlike the internet itself. And so so when you talk about NFTs, and when you talk about NFTs, you can talk about interchangeably about NFTs, crypto, or metadata. It's just code that sits on the blockchain. And by being on the blockchain, it can be managed and tracked and accounted for. So focusing on NFTs, short term, I don't think it's such a big deal. Because I think, and certainly for the music business right now, I feel like NFTs are a problem looking for a solution. One of the arguments I've heard is, well, you can release your music directly. I'm like, you can already do that. You don't need blockchain or NFTs to do that. I think the application for it in the short term that make more sense are for non-traditional products like digital collectibles, ticketing, other things that the nature of blockchain enhanced the experience. But I release it. I've yet to hear a great argument of why everybody should release music on the blockchain via NFTs. I think what we're seeing right now are more folks dipping their toes in it and kind of doing a little trial and error and experimenting. And everybody's looking at it, but mass adoption I don't think is an immediate, an obvious eventuality. It might be, but part of the problem with blockchain, when we talk about blockchain, is people, not surprisingly, always associate blockchain with crypto, even though you can use blockchain separate from crypto. And a lot of people, myself included, are sitting out crypto. Like, I'm not going to buy or sell crypto And by the way, half of them are scams, all these ICOs. And unfortunately, a lot of that taints blockchain. The other problem with blockchain is the technology is still very new and it's not that robust. It's actually very slow. And so when you're trying to, do multiple transactions, it can really bog down. Now, there are technologies and developments to kind of work around that and figure out ways, with side chains and that can do batch processing. But the current, for most blockchains, the architecture is not yet really robust enough to support a lot of these applications that require thousands, if not millions, of transactions to be managed on a very short-term basis.
I mean, we could literally look at this from the other, like from history, is that it literally took around 10 years, not like more than 10 years for Bitcoin to become a huge thing. And it's still not widely adopted. People think that Bitcoin is going to be the new gold standard, and that still hasn't happened. And it's only been recently widely adopted, well, quote unquote, widely adopted, because Elon Musk decides to be crazy and go like, oh, I'm going to start using Bitcoin to trade. And that shot up the price. So yeah, of course, this NFT thing is definitely going to probably take a really long while.
And the problem with Bitcoin and any crypto is, is it being widely accepted? There are two issues with it. One feeds the other, one of which it's highly unstable. So because the price fluctuates so much, when someone's buying and someone's selling, the odds are someone's going to get disappointed because someone's going to sell and then it's going to go higher, or someone's going to buy and then it goes lower. So it's inherent instability. The other is, and it's a function of the instability, is that it, like as legal tender, it is not really usable in most places. Like unfortunately, most of the uses are illegal. But how many stores can you actually walk into, literally or virtually, and use crypto to make purchases? The answer is very few. And so until there's really, right now it's really just purely a speculative security. It's based on, which is why I think it's really scary, because there's no business model around it, and B, there's no central authority trying to regulate it, to manage the fluctuations. So when you think about traditional currency, let's just talk about US dollars. So US dollars has a real business model beyond just trading. It's the most popular currency for business. So the dollars are always going to be in demand in the real world, in the marketplace. And the other thing is you have the US government and the Treasury engaging in proactive monetary policy to ensure stability, that it doesn't get too high or get too low, because for it to be a popular currency for business, it has to be stable, which, as I said before, is the problem with Bitcoin. Is people are afraid to use Bitcoin for business because if I sell something for $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, well, tomorrow I could then have $500 because it goes down. Conversely, if I have $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, I'm concerned if I buy something with it. Like there's a famous story back in the early days of Bitcoin, some guy bought a pizza with like 20,000 Bitcoins. And he bought a pizza, and it's something, and that pizza is now worth like $50 million. And, it's an extreme example, but that's the issue. And for it to be a viable kind of alternative, to dollars or gold, it needs to be stabilized, and and part of it is being usable in the outside world, because like even with gold, which is not technically a popular currency like the dollars, but gold is used to make jewelry and machinery, and so there's a business model around gold that can drive the price other than what speculators are doing. Because if there's demand for gold in the world, this shorting gold is not going to drive the price down. You're just going to lose a lot of money because there's a real world demand for gold that's going to drive the price up. Mm-hmm. Same thing is if all of a sudden people are using gold fund alternatives, you going long on gold and buying a lot of gold, if people don't want gold, then going long on it is not going to drive up the price. And so Yes, hedge funds try and manipulate the markets to do mega deals to push, prices here and there. But on big enough platforms like gold or currency, a trade cannot overcome market demand or lack of demand.
I know that most of our listeners are probably not economists and financial experts. So I think like one way to look at it is that we're probably not going to see a blockchain solution or an NFT solution as it pertains to metadata, and especially when it comes to transactional, because I feel like at this point, a lot of catalogs, a lot of catalogs and copyrights are sold in and out. We look back at let's say Taylor Swift and then Shakira, and then we can see that there's actually a constant not a constant, but there is transaction going on.
And absolutely, and you hit on the most important one of the real issues. Even if the metadata is correct today, one publisher on the song sells their share to somebody else. If they don't change the metadata is wrong. And so the metadata, it's not just about getting it right once, it's about the updating of the dynamics, because the ownership changes, and by the way, sometimes the metadata seems right and, oh, we omitted this right, or we have to update it to reflect that writer. You need the ability not just to get it right the first time, but to constantly update it. And by having it in one repository, it makes it much easier than how, where right now where it's highly diffused and it's like playing whack-a-mole trying to get all the metadata correct.
Yeah, I mean, the information is actually extremely sporadic, and it feels like, yeah, it is extremely sporadic. And also the other part of it is that NFT will probably not be an immediate solution. It's just, I think Dave explained it and analyzed it very well, is because it's due to volatility of the underlying product, because there's no underlying value. For this non-fungible.
Well, in the case of like a Kings of Leon album, it's easy. The value is whatever you pay for the album. But right. What's happened, but that is not, but what the key one is, that's not creating inherent value for the NFT. The NFT is just the platform in which you're buying the album. But you as like, if I'm buying that new Kings of Leon album, I'm paying in US dollars and I'm getting the album. And it's the NFT blockchain is completely in the background. So it's not like, as a music consumer, it's not like, oh, I'm buying into NFTs and I'm sure. It's like, I'm a Kings of Leon fan and this is why I'm buying the new album. Fine. Cost me $20, here's $20. I don't need to know anything about NFT, and it doesn't mean that I'm endorsing NFT.
Right, exactly. It's like basically using GameStop stock to buy things, and it just probably does not make sense. So my last question before we start moving into music of the week for our audience here is, do you think that the metadata will be less of an issue in the next decade or two? I know you kind of said like 5 to 6 years, but in the next decade or two, do you think that the issue is already, or it will be resolved, or do you think like it'd be too complicated to be resolved at this point?
So just to answer the question about, do I think this will be solved in 10 years? The answer is I'm guardedly optimistic that it will, because I think a combination of the industry in general embracing technology, combined with the pressure among the relevant stakeholders that sooner or later you're going to get cooperation, and cooperation is needed to get there. And I think it's going to take some painful years, but I do believe it just makes too much sense. And it'd be one thing if it makes somebody less competitively and disadvantage somebody competitively. But this is really just about collecting money. It's not about having a hit or signing an artist, or it's really about you've done the work to develop the songwriter, develop the artist, break the artist. It's about collecting the money you deserve. And so I want to believe it will be resolved.
I definitely hope so too. I mean, as our society progresses even to more like technologically advanced society, I feel like at some point we have to start playing catch up, especially in the music industry. And this is one big, huge step. Although it is a $10 billion question, it is one $10 billion step that we do have to take as like the music industry as a whole. I do agree with that. So I think right now we're going to progress into music of the week. So in this section, Dave, this is your first time playing with us with music of the week. So basically, music of the week is the question is just basically what music have you been listening to recently, and what music do you think you're going to be listening going into the next week?
The short answer is the same stuff. I've been really lame recently about looking for new music. So I am, and I've been very lazy. So I primarily listen to a handful of Pandora stations that I like and just really set them and forget them. My three favorites are Chet Baker Radio, which is Chet Baker was kind of considered the white Miles Davis. He also sang. It's kind of old school jazz, very good background. When I just want to put a smile on my face, I love Yacht Rock Radio. Yacht Rock is kind of easy listening rock music from the 70s. It's some of it is a little corny, but it puts a smile on my face. Then I listen to. I'm a big grunge fan, so I listen to the grunge radio station. My taste in music is skewed really towards rock, and there's not a lot of great new rock music out there, and I say that knowing I haven't really made much of an effort to try and find it. But the industry is so focused on pop and hip hop that as an old lazy person, without having rock music pushed to me, I'm not really finding it. So I bet there are really good rock bands out there that there are a handful of new rock bands that I really like. I really like the Struts, who have just been around for a couple of years. Trying to think who else I really like. I'm having a brain fart. I'd up for suggestions is really the thing. It's like,
all right, my Bluetooth just died. I said I haven't done a very good job about reaching out to my friends who have good taste in music, saying, what should I listen to? You know? Like I really should be listening to like Phoebe Bridger, because she's very rock and roll. I don't know if I've heard a note of her music, and I just have to get less lazy and go check it out.
Do you think you will ever take an interest into listening foreign music, like that's not English speaking music?
Yeah, because I really don't care about lyrics. I'm really about melody. So like if I hear, like if it's music I really like, sung in a foreign language, I definitely would listen to it. Because it's not that I don't care about lyrics. I just don't focus on it. I really love a great melody, and that's what really moves me. I get a real visceral response from it. To me, it's just English language music is more kind of what's pushed to me, but I wouldn't exclude anything else.
Yeah, you could listen. You could give Japanese rock a try. One specific music would probably be Lisa. Lisa is a gurenge. That's a really good rock. And actually, I've heard recently that's really cool. You ever heard of the Who? HU? Is that a Chinese group? I feel like
they're a Mongolian metal band.
Oh yes, I have. Yes, I have.
No, they're very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, my friend.
What was the Japanese act? Lisa,
literally Lisa.
I'm gonna check it out.
She's a solo artist, but she usually sings a lot. She's a great singer. I think she's up there with Ariana Grande. Her voice is absolutely tremendous.
Is she a pop artist?
Yes, she is a pop artist, but I would say her genre is geared more towards rock.
I mean, I like what I call alternative pop. You know, I think Billie Eilish is kind of crosses between pop and rock. I don't necessarily need heavy music. I like music with a little edge or a little, just quirkiness to it.
Yeah. This one is definitely up there. Well, for me, I'm going to look into Fearless, the entire album by Taylor Swift, and yeah, this actually touched a lot about what we are talking about, especially the financial aspect. Because if listeners didn't listen to one of our previous episodes, that Scooter Brown actually bought some of Scooter Brown sold some of Taylor Swift's album, and in retribution to that specific transaction, Taylor Swift came out with the Fearless album, and it's basically the same thing. It's just that she kind of switched it up a little bit. And I feel like from the more economical side, if there's more supply, it's probably going to drive down the price, and it's not great for the Wall Street hedge fund, which is absolutely great, I guess. Not really great. It depends which party you're looking at. But this is definitely one album that I'm going to take a look into again.
Cool.
So thank you, Dave. Thank you for coming on to the show. I wish we get to do this more often in the future.
You know where to find me.
Cool. I guess I'll see you in class tomorrow.
Rock and roll. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye. We also want to thank Matt Klein for writing our awesome jingle for SUR Round Sound. Thanks, Matt.